Chapter 21. The Escape. It would work. They could make it work. Jonas told himself again and again throughout the day. But that evening, everything changed, all of it. All the things they had thought through so meticulously fell apart that night. Jonas was forced to flee. He left the dwelling shortly after the sky became dark and the community still. It was terribly dangerous because some of the work crews were still about. But he moved skillfully and silently, staying in the shadows, making his way past the darkened dwellings and the empty central plaza toward the river. Beyond the plaza, he could see the house of the old with the annex behind it, outlined against the night sky. But he could not stop there. There was no time. Every minute counted now, and every minute must take him farther from the community. Now he was on the bridge, hunched over on the bicycle, battling steadily. He could see the dark turning water far below. He felt surprisingly no fear nor any regrets at leaving the community behind. But he felt a very deep sadness that he had left his closest friend behind. He knew that in the danger of his escape, he must be absolutely silent. But with his heart and mind, he called back and hoped that with his capacity for hearing beyond, the giver would know that Jonas had said goodbye. It had happened at the evening meal. The family unit was eating together as always, Lily chattering away, mother and father making their customary comments and lies. Jonas knew about the day. Nearby, Gabriel played happily on the floor, babbling his baby talk, looking with glee now and then toward Jonas, obviously delighted to have him back after the unexpected night away from the dwelling. Father glanced down toward the toddler. "Enjoy it, little guy," he said. "This is your last night as visitor." "What do you mean?" Jonas asked him. Father sighed with disappointment. "Well, you know, he wasn't here when you got home this morning because we had him stay overnight at the nurturing center. It seemed like a good opportunity, with you gone, to give it a try. He'd been sleeping so soundly. Didn't go well?" Mother asked sympathetically. Father gave a rueful laugh. "That's an understatement. It was a disaster. He cried all night. Apparently the night crew couldn't handle it. They were really frazzled by the time I got to work." "Gabe, you naughty thing," Lily said with a scolding look toward the grinning toddler on the floor. "So," Father went on, "we obviously had to make the decision. Even I voted for Gabriel's release when we had the meeting this afternoon." Jonas put down his fork and stared at his father. "Release?" he asked. Father nodded. "We certainly gave it our best try, didn't we?" "Yes, we did," Mother agreed empathetically. Lily nodded in agreement too. "First thing tomorrow morning, we have to start our preparation for the naming ceremony. So we thought we'd get this taken care of right away. It's bye-bye to you, Gabe, in the morning," Father had said in his sweet sing-song voice. Jonas reached the opposite side of the river. He stopped briefly and looked back. The community where his entire life had been lived lay behind him now, sleeping. At dawn, the orderly, disciplined life he had always known would continue again, without him. The life where nothing was ever unexpected or inconvenient or unusual. The life without color, pain, or past. He pushed firmly again at the pedal with his foot and continued riding along the road. It was not safe to spend time looking back. He thought of the rules he had broken so far, enough that if he were caught now, he would be condemned. First, he had left the dwelling at night, a major transgression. Second, he had robbed the community of food, a very serious crime, even though what he had taken was leftovers set out on the dwelling doorsteps for collection. Third, he had stolen his father's bicycle. He had hesitated for a moment, standing beside the bike port in the darkness, not wanting anything of his father's and uncertain as well whether he could comfortably ride the larger bike when he was so accustomed to his own. But it was necessary because it had the child's seat attached at the back, and he had taken Gabriel too. He could feel the little head, nuzzled against his back, bouncing gently against him as he rode. Gabriel was sleeping soundly, strapped into the seat. Before he had left the dwelling, he had laid his hands gently on Gab's back. He had transmitted to him the most soothing memory he could, a slow swinging hammock on the palm trees on an island, someplace at evening with the rhythmic sound of water lapping hypnotically against the beach nearby. As the memory seeped from him into the new child, he could feel Gabe's sleep ease and deepen. There had been no stir at all when Jonas lifted him from the crib and placed him gently into the molded seat. He knew that he had the remaining hours of night before they would be aware of his escape, so he rode hard, steadily, willing himself not to tire as the minutes and miles passed. There had been no time to receive the memories he and the giver had counted on of strength and courage, so he relied on what he had and hoped it would be enough. He circled the outlying communities. Their dwellings stark gradually. The distances between communities widened with longer stretches of empty road. His legs ached at first, then as time passed, they became numb. At dawn, Gabriel began to stir. They were in an isolated place. Fields on either side of the road were dotted with thickest of trees. Here and there, he saw a stream and made his way toward it across a rotted, bumpy meadow. Gabriel, wide awake, now giggled as the bicycle jolted him up and down. Jonas strapped Gabe, lifted him from the bike, and watched him investigate the grass and twigs with delight. Carefully, he hid the bicycle in thick bushes. "Morning meal, Gabe." He unwrapped some of the food and fed them both. Then he filled the cup he had brought with water from the stream and held it for Gabriel to drink. He drank thirstily himself and sat by the stream, watching the new child play. He was exhausted. He knew he must sleep, resting his own muscles and preparing himself for more hours on the bicycle. It would not be safe to travel in daylight. They would be looking for him soon. He found a place deeply hidden in the trees, took the new child there, and lay down holding Gabriel in his arms. Gabe struggled cheerfully as if it were a wrestling game, the kind they had played back in the dwelling with tickles and laughter. "Sorry, Gabe," Jonas told him. "I know it's morning, and I know you just woke up, but we have to sleep now." He cuddled the small baby close to him and wrapped a little blanket around him, murmuring to Gabriel soothingly. Then he pressed his hands firmly and transmitted a memory of deep, contented exhaustion. Gabriel's head nodded after a moment and fell against Jonas's chest. Together, the fugitives slept through the first dangerous day. The most terrifying thing was the plains. By now, days had passed. Jonas no longer knew how many. The journey had become automatic, the sleep by days hidden in underbrush and trees, the finding of water, the careful division of scraps of food augmented by what he could find in the fields, and the endless miles on the bicycle. By night, his leg muscles were taut now. They ached when he settled himself to sleep, but they were stronger, and he stopped now less often to rest. Sometimes he paused and lifted Gabriel down for a brief bit of exercise, running down the road or through the field together in the dark. But always when he returned, he strapped down the complaining toddler into the seat again and remounted. His legs were ready. So he had enough strength of his own and had not needed what the giver might have provided had there been time. But when the plains came, he wished that he could have received the courage. He knew they were search planes. They flew so low they woke him with the noise of their engines. And sometimes looking out and up fearfully from the hiding places, he could almost see the faces of the searchers. He knew that they could not see color and that their flesh, as well as Gabriel's light golden curls, would be no more than smears of gray against the colorless foliage. But he remembered from his science and technology studies at school that the search planes used heat-seeking devices, which could identify body warmth and would hone in on to humans huddled in shrubbery. So always when he heard the aircraft sound, he searched to Gabriel and transmitted memories of snow, keeping some for himself. Together they became cold, and when the planes were gone, they would shiver, holding each other until sleep came again. Sometimes urging the memories into Gabriel, Jonas felt that they were more shallow, a little weaker than they had been. It was what he had hoped and what he and the giver had planned, that as he moved away from the community, He would shed their memories and leave them behind for the people. But now when he needed them, when the planes came, he tried hard to cling to what he still had of cold and to use it for their survival. Usually the aircraft came by day when they were hiding, but he was alert at night too on the days when they were searching. It was hard to sleep, and the days dragged on endlessly. They were cold, and he felt frightened at times as the time passed and nothing changed, until he thought he might break. Jonas's heart raced and his pulse quickened. He knew he would have to take Gabriel to a new community soon, that it was what the giver had said, and he would have to leave them behind. One day when they were too tired to go much further, he found a thick growth of trees and brush to shelter them while he slept. They had just settled down together when suddenly he heard the sound of engines. Startled, he pulled the blanket over them and pressed the baby to him. Jonas pressed his eyes shut, hoping that somehow they would not be seen. It was difficult to hear. His heart pounded as he listened to the sound grow closer. Then it passed. He held his breath. He could tell it was a search plane. The noise of the engines was different from the usual kind. It was low to the ground. He could feel the breeze as it sped by, rattling the branches above their hiding place. The sound receded in the distance, and he sighed with relief, but he didn't relax. He knew that they were searching and would continue searching. He felt the cold creeping back into his heart again. The sun began to set. Jonas knew they would have to move again soon. He shifted the blanket and looked at Gabriel, who had not been stirred awake yet. But now as the sun sank, he could feel the new child's restlessness. He would have to keep him quiet. He hugged him close and pressed his lips against his forehead. "She," he said softly, and felt the warmth of the body against him, relaxing. "We are safe now." Jonas had hoped that the next day would be different and that they would find a place where they could finally be safe. As he lay there with Gabriel in his arms, he thought about what it might be like in a new community, one that was not governed by the same strict rules, where they would not have to hide in fear of being captured. "They will have to come to us," he thought, "because they will not know where we are." He dreamed of a place where he could feel free. But as the hours passed, he began to wonder if they would ever get there. When he was finally asleep, he dreamed of the giver, a place of warmth and light, a landscape filled with colors and laughter, where nothing bad could ever happen again. But when he awoke, the nightmare was there again, a sudden, horrible roar as the plane had come back, cutting through the silence. He clutched Gabriel tighter, feeling the warmth of his body against his, but it was not enough to block out the sound. The engines roared louder, drowning out everything else, and the fear engulfed him. He could feel the heat of the plane, the brightness of the sun bearing down on them, and he knew they were close. "We have to go," he whispered, lifting the baby from his arms and quickly fastening him into the seat. But before he could mount the bicycle, the plane appeared overhead. Jonas fell to his knees as it hovered above them, searching. It was only a moment, but it felt like forever. Jonas's heart raced as he realized he had to move. The engines roared again, and the plane circled above them. He heard a voice echoing through the trees. "This is the search plane. All citizens must return to their homes immediately. This is a public safety announcement. If you are in danger or in need of assistance, please report to the nearest authority." Jonas felt a surge of panic. They could not be discovered. "We must go now, Gabriel," he said urgently. With trembling hands, he secured the baby and swung himself onto the bike, pedaling furiously. The sound of the plane faded into the distance, but he knew it was still searching. He had to put as much distance between them and the community as possible. They rode hard, the wind whipping around them as he pedaled faster and faster, heart pounding in his chest. The trees blurred past and he focused on the road ahead. The thought of being caught was terrifying, and the danger of being discovered was all too real. He could feel the weight of the memories pressing down on him, the urgency of their situation clear. As night fell, he found another place to hide, deep in the woods where the shadows enveloped them. He huddled close to Gabriel, whispering comforting words as they fell into a restless sleep, but the fear never left him. It lingered in the back of his mind like a specter, waiting to pounce. The following day, he moved them again, always keeping a lookout for the planes, for the signs of searchers that might come upon them. Days turned into a blur, the landscape shifting as they traveled further from the community. He could feel his strength waning, and he feared what would happen if they were found. He had broken so many rules already. The thought of being caught now was unbearable. As he lay down one night, the stars twinkling overhead, he closed his eyes and tried to summon the memories of joy and warmth, the memories that would give him strength to keep going. He knew that they could not give up, that they had to keep moving forward even when it seemed hopeless. The darkness pressed in around them, and he felt the weight of the world upon his shoulders. He had to protect Gabriel. He had to find a way to keep him safe. As he drifted off to sleep, he whispered a promise to himself. They would find a new home, a place where they would be free and safe, away from the rules and the darkness of the past. But even as he held on to that hope, doubts crept in. Would they ever find a place where they could be safe? What if they were never found? And as those thoughts spiraled, Jonas realized that he could not think of that now. All he could do was keep moving forward and trust that they would find a way. And so he rode on deeper into the unknown until he reached the edge of a new horizon, where he would have to face whatever lay ahead and the uncertainty of when they did not come at all. Discussion. What challenges does Jonas face as he escapes? How does his journey symbolize his growth? Written activity. Write a story about a time you set out on a journey, whether real or imaginary. How did you feel during your journey?